team, let's install a dash cam. So what we have here is the Uniden Dashview 40R. Now it's a pretty nifty little unit. So it actually includes 3 cameras, one forward facing, one rearward facing, and one for inside the cabin, which is pretty cool. So 4K front, HD rear, and HD internal as well. So look, guys, I really like dash cams because they really protect you in a number of different ways. So having footage can be the difference between an at-fault claim and a not at-fault claim. You know, units like this will actually switch on if they detect any impact. So you could be capturing someone that's trying to do damage to your vehicle or steal it or something like that. And they can also record when you're having a bit of fun, which we'll talk about in a different video. So the subject that we're installing into here, guys, is a 2022 FN Ford Mustang California Special. So obviously what you're going to see here is going to be talking to what it takes to get a dash cam into this particular vehicle. But the reality is the principles that we're going to run through here are going to apply for pretty much any sort of modern car nowadays. So let's talk about the bits and pieces that we're going to need to make this happen. So I've unpacked the dash cam here, as you can see. So we've got the rear camera, we've got the main camera, so you're outward facing and you're inward facing. We've got some bracketry. What we have here, and this is what I really like about Uniden, they include everything that you need to get going within the packaging. So what you see here is a cigarette lighter option. It's great to have in there, but we're actually going to focus on hardwiring. And you can see here your hardwire kit and the associated ends here. So we've got an earth, we've got a power, and we've got accessory. This particular cable is designed to run from your front camera to your rear, and we'll walk through what it takes to make that happen without making too much of a mess. We've got a memory card here as well, which is cool, and some stickers that are actually used to stick your dash cams on, which is all pretty cool. So other stuff here. Now I'm going to be using the internal fuse box, and these fuse taps make it really easy. So I've got a few different variations here just so that everyone can see the different options. So that's your mini blades. You've got a miniature here as well, and your regular sized fuses. Multimeter. So whenever you're doing anything electrical, this is a really cool tool to have. Now you can buy these for, you know, 20 bucks from Bunnings, or you can spend a few $100s if you really want to. This is just one that I've had lying around for a while. You can see I've got the manual for the Mustang here as well. Well, I'll talk through why that's relevant, but I think it's really important that when you're doing this sort of work, you take the time to research and understand the car and where all the various bits are before you start pulling panels off and doing things. We've got cable ties because you always need cable ties. Now these are really important. Now one of the things that stresses me out about doing work inside a car are the panels. So interior panels have clips that can break really easily. Now this is a relatively new vehicle, so you know, things like plastics shouldn't be getting hard or worn or easy to crack, and the clips should be pretty fresh. But what we have here is a range of tools that you can use to pry panels out. It's good to have the right tools, but it's more important to have patience, and I think that that's an important one we'll go through as we progress through this installation. Rounding out, guys, so we've got a knife, we've got a crimping tool and a cutter and a couple of screwdrivers. So that should do it. Let's get to work, eh? So guys, before we dive into this, just a little bit of a disclaimer or some advice, I guess. Now, this installation is not complex. This is something that an amateur or someone that's never done anything like this can actually pull off. But if you're uncertain, we are dealing with electronics here. Things can go wrong. If you have uncertainty, don't just push through. Get an auto elect to do the job. This is not huge work, so it shouldn't cost you a stack of money. But like I said, with patience and time, it's something that can be pulled off. So talking about time, I like to allow 2 or 3 hours. I've never worked on one of these before, so I like to really take my time and get things right. I don't want to break things, and I'd like to do the research and make sure that I'm not damaging anything and I'm getting the job done. So a couple of hours as a minimum. Secondly, space. So this is not an overly large garage, and this is actually a lot larger a car than I thought it was going to be. So make sure you have a clean space to work in, guys. Otherwise, you know, you're picking around stuff and it makes life hard. So in this case, I won't be using the boot, but there's plenty of room to walk around. Plenty of room right here. Now, you're going to be spending a lot of time here in the back of the car doing bits and bobs, particularly down in this corner as you do the wiring, which we'll get through soon, and access to these sorts of panels here that are going to have to come off. We'll talk to fuse boxes in a second, but access to under here may or may not be something that you require in your car. So guys, the first thing that you want to do is locate your power points, and by that I mean fuse boxes. Now, back in the day it was a red and black wire through a firewall. Thankfully these days, these newer vehicles have fuse boxes and comprehensive fusing systems throughout. So you can see here there's a fuse box under the bonnet or in the engine bay. Now, if that was a fallback and I needed to find power to there, you'd be finding a hole or a grommet in the firewall, which you can't even see in these new cars. But thankfully, this particular Mustang has, and like most modern vehicles, will have an internal fuse box too. So we'll just be able to see that imprint there in that plastic panel. So that's the panel that we need to get behind. Now, obviously this is an American vehicle, so it would have been designed for left-hand drive where these pedals would not be there and make life a whole lot easier. But look, it is what it is, and we just got to work around it. So guys, as we saw before, the actual fuse box is right in that back corner. But I do know that my preference is going to be to run wires up and through there. So I think it's worthwhile actually getting this sill panel off, this kick panel out, and expose everything there to allow for us to run that cable work up in comfort. So look, as I said, we've got these various tools that we can utilize to make life easier. Generally, your sill panels are a pull-up proposition. So we just slide under there and gently tug at it until we hear that little click. And I'll show you what these clips look like in a moment. But you can see these pieces here go into their own grooves in here. So once you've actually taken them out, it will give you an idea of what they look like, and it'll help you reposition them later on as well. So guys, now that we've removed all of this, let's have a look. So we've exposed a good chunk of what looks like a loom, which makes sense because if it's a fusing point, you're going to have a lot of cables coming out from there. So I'm going to try and show you guys. So you can see in that back corner, we've got a stack of fuses that we have access to. So that is the point where we will find our power and accessory, and we'll also look for an earth. So earthing points are really important because what you're basically doing there is trying to tap into the earth of the vehicle, and the best way to do that is to find metal. You can see there's a couple of options there. Now that's a metal bracket and it's connected directly to the frame or the body, but there's other ones up here too. So we will work through that as we undertake the wiring. Alright guys, so as you can tell, it's pretty tight under there. Now, you should always be going through your owner's manual, but in this particular instance, I'm just trying to educate myself a little bit more on what I'm looking at down there. So you can see this is a diagram of that fuse panel. Each fuse is numbered, and then it goes through what each fuse is set for here. So we're looking for accessory, we're looking for constant power and earth. Earth is a separate issue here. But if we look through here, we can see a couple that say not used. And I think that, yeah, that was the full size 10 amp, the red one that I saw under there. So these are the ones that you want to test to as a starting point, because spares are good. If you don't have to tap into an existing circuit, that's the preferred way of doing it. Now, it's important that you ensure you know what you're tapping into regardless. So you don't really want to go into something like a vehicle dynamics module, because I would assume that that's controlling your traction control, your SRS and all those sorts of things. Not that anything would go wrong. You know, I've got another car that has a dash cam in it that's been in there since brand new, and the car's 14 years old and it still works perfectly. What you don't want to do is put yourself at any unnecessary risk, given that there's a whole lot of stuff here. So I'm going to jump in there and do some testing there. The fallback position for me is going to be something like a window or right-hand window power, something like that, where, you know, if you do blow a fuse, it's not going to deem your car undrivable and it's not going to be a safety issue. So let's get under there and check it out, eh? So guys, before I get under there, I thought I'd actually take some time to show you what I'm doing. So as you know, the multimeter has the prongs. One side goes to earth, the other side is testing power. Now, this is the top of a fuse, and that's basically what you're going to be seeing when you're looking at that fuse box. Now, you can see on either end of this, there's little metal test points, and you can see they run through and they join in the middle. Now, when a fuse blows, that middle piece of metal melts and stops the circuit from being a circuit, I guess, if you could put it that way. So what you're going to see me doing is putting the prong of the multimeter into these to see if there's power. All right, so we've situated ourselves next to that fuse point in the footwell, or the driver's side footwell of the Mustang. So we're just going to turn on our trusty multimeter here. Now, there's 2 points that we use, and what we're essentially doing is trying to find current. It will tell you whether there is current and obviously read out what the numbers look like. So this is a 12-volt system. I won't say most cars are, because there's new cars these days that are operating at higher voltages, and certainly older cars operate at lower as well. But again, this is a modern vehicle. This video is designed to give you a view of what to expect in a car of this sort of vintage, and it is a 12-volt system in this particular Mustang. So the black is a grounding point, and the red is what we're using to find that power. So now, given the location here, I need another 5 hands, and I've only got 2. So what I'm going to try and do is find a good earthing point where I could jam this in. And I think if I look here, we can put that in there as a reasonable earthing point, I think, which frees up a hand to get under to that fuse box and do some testing. So guys, I've spent a little bit of time under here, and there were some blanks which I was actually interested in using, because it means you're sort of not double tapping into an existing fusing point. But unfortunately, none of these are actually carrying any power. So it would look to me as though they are just blanks with really nothing in there. Now, what I did find is this particular fuse down here, this 10 ampere, that's actually a fusible point for power windows. Now, as we know, power windows only operate when there's actually accessory power to the vehicle. So I thought that this might be a good option, but I'm going to test that anyway. So I insert that prong into there, and I can see that there is no power. However, if I step up here and turn on the accessory power of the vehicle, and then test it again, excuse all the beeps, I should find 12 volts, guys. So I confirmed that that fusing point can be utilized for our accessory tap-in. And just to check that again, I'm going to turn that accessory power off and touch that little guy again. As you can see, there's no power. So it seems like we've found an accessory point, which is good. So next up, it's about finding a full power. So power that is always on, regardless of whether you're on accessory mode or not. Now, looking at the schematic, this particular one here, which is a 10 ampere, this is a full-size fuse, as you can see, whereas that's a mini. So we have no accessory power on at the moment. And you can see we're reading 12.28 volts. So that tells me that that particular fusible point has power all the time. So it looks like we have now found that second fusing point, which is cool. Alrighty guys, now that we know what we're tapping into, it's time to get your fuse taps out. So what you can see here, so that point goes into that fusing point, and then what you have here, I like to call it a piggyback, I'm sure that is a technical term, but what it does, it gives you a provision to put two fuses into the single point. Now it's important to note that where the original fuse goes into the first slot on the left here, which is closest to the power, and then the fuse that you're adding goes there. Now that's more important, I guess, where you're using different sized fuses. So say you had a 20 amp on the initial fuse line, and you want to run a 10 amp for the accessory that you're putting in, whatever it might be, you put the 20 amp first. Now, in our case, I've been able to locate two 10 amp slots in the fuse box, and I'm going to use 10 amp fuses because that's within specification for Uniden. So, and then the other side here, a bullet connector connects to the male side of your hard wiring kit. Let's get to it, guys. Alrighty guys, so you can see here we've actually put those fuse taps into those two fuses that we identified. You can see here we have a couple of connectors up here which will eventually shrink wrap, but I just wanted to show you guys what you're expecting to look at. We've also got the earthing point here. Now all that's left to do, and we'll do a comprehensive test later on, but I think at this point it's prudent just to check that we have power. So we're just going to boot up the accessories, and you can see there it's come to life, which is pretty cool. So next step is to get the wiring going, guys. So given that we're working down here, and ultimately these cables are going to have to run up here, up the A pillar, we're going to have to be careful of the A pillar airbag, and we'll walk through that in a sec. And then we're going to have to run the wire up the top of that windscreen to its ultimate position in this corner. It kind of makes sense a lot of the time to continue wiring up at the top. But there's nothing to say that you can't bring your wires back down here, and we're talking about obviously the cables that go to the back camera that's going to end up on that windshield. So you can go either way, there's no right or wrong way. I think I'm going to attack it from the top just for simplicity. I've had a quick look, and it's relatively easy to get under the hood liner on this car, and every car is a little bit different, but it seems to me like that's going to be the easier way to do it, so that's the way I'll attack it. So first things first, it's about finding a way to run that cable into that dash up here, up through the A pillar and over there. So let's get cracking. Alright guys, so we've removed that trim piece which allows us easy cable access now. So this A pillar cover, I never really completely remove these because you don't really need to, and that can be a bit of a pain to put back in. So you can see we've got access there, which is fine. We can run the cables through there. But what you're looking at right here, guys, is your curtain airbag or your A-pillar airbag. You do not want to run cables in front of that for various reasons. Obviously, you don't want to impede that airbag if it needs to deploy as a critical safety device. So what we do is we run it underneath, as you can see there, and you can see the headliner is quite readily coming down, which is really good. So what we're going to do is run through there, find this place, run it through and behind that headliner to that point. So let's get that done. So team, now that we've run that cable to the front of the windshield, it's time to install that front camera. So what you'll find in the box is this bracket. So this bracket goes in on top of the unit, which you'll see here. Now, interestingly, the first step is to apply this electrostatic film to your windshield. Now, The reason for this is to protect your glass, is what I'm being told by Uniden. And I guess it works because these can be a little bit hard to get off at times. Now, if you ever wanted to remove, service, replace, or whatever you needed to do, being able to take that film off in the place of trying to lever that off will probably not a bad idea. So once we've done that, this cable attaches to the top and we're going to run this cable through to the back camera. Alright guys, a quick update. So we've mounted the front camera, as you can see there. We've avoided these airbags by running the cables behind them. Now, as I was running this side here, obviously there's a curtain airbag in this vehicle right down the side, which pretty much ends where that white area ends there. So we've tucked the cable right up behind that so that it's not impeding that at all. A little bit dark in here, but we ran the cables up through there. And you can see it hanging out at the middle of the windscreen. So it's time to get that film up and mount that camera. Alright guys, so we've done all the wiring. We have a rear camera attached, which is cool. Now it's at this point where you start to see a very pretty car in pieces and you think, okay, we're done. Let's put all the panels in and put it back together. Now do not do that, guys. What we really need to do here is test out this camera to make sure that our wiring has worked. Now going back to the beginning of this video, we went with a hardwired kit because it allows for parking mode. Now, parking mode allows this camera to wake up based on an internal G sensor. So if it detects motion or any sort of movement in the vehicle, it'll turn on and start recording. And now you can set that to record for as long as you like. I think the default is for 30 seconds or 1 minute or something like that. So it can be a really great asset from a safety perspective. But let's see if it gets power to start with. So let's go down here and power up. And you can see it turns on pretty quickly. You can also see the 3 cameras. So there's the internal one, the rear facing camera, and also the forward facing camera, which is pretty cool. So that we have power when the car is on. So let's turn that back off. And you can see it's telling you that it's going into parking mode, which is a good start. So it's a good sign. Now, like I said, this is based on a G sensor, so I'm going to give this windshield a bit of a knock and see if it can wake it up. Oh, there you go. So that red flashing light tells you that it started filming under that parking mode, which is pretty cool. So now it's interesting because if you fire this back up,
the parking mode got activated while you were away.
That's pretty cool. So it'll actually tell you. So damage or things like that isn't immediately apparent. So if it has been triggered, it'll actually tell you that it's been triggered. So it's pretty cool. Alright team, so if you've gotten this far in your install and you didn't experience what was in that last clip in terms of testing, look, there's a very, very good reason why I didn't put any of that away or pack the car up. Now, you've added 3 things to this car. You've added an accessory power, you've added full power, and you've added an earth, and then a range of cables throughout. So generally everything that could go wrong is going to come in terms of what's been added. So if you're not powering up at all, go back and check that accessory lead, check that power lead, make sure that your fuses are okay, you're connected appropriately into the fuse taps, and all of your connections are sound. There may be a chance, particularly if you've got a blown fuse, that you pinch the cable or something as you were running things through these through the headliner or the various pillars that you've gone through. So as I said, if it doesn't turn on at all, you want to go back and check that battery wire, and it's marked on that loom for the Hardwire kit. If it shuts down when the car's turned off, i.e. it's not engaging parking mode, a really good way to start is to go into these settings, and there's a whole stack of them. You can do this through the app as well, but the car's not mine, so I'm leaving that to the owner of the car. So you go through and there's parking mode. So you can see I've selected that. If you haven't selected that, then it's not going to switch on. It's pretty simple. Now, if it's entering parking mode when the car's running, again, go back and look at that cabling and make sure that it's lining up to what we've said in this video. And all else fails, or it's probably a good starting point, your manual has a really great troubleshooting guide. So take the time to read it. A lot of the time these sorts of things just get packed away. In this particular case, there's pages of settings and different things that you can elect to have set into this dash cam. So make sure you're getting the most of it. So guys, there you go, a 3-way Uniden dash cam into a Mustang. Let me know your thoughts.